Over half of the European country of Switzerland is situated along the Alpine chain, which stretches from southern France to eastern Austria. Of the numerous Swiss peaks, two are famous throughout the world: the distinctive pyramid of the Matterhorn on the Swiss-Italian border, and the impressive bulk of the Eiger, situated in Switzerland's Bernese Oberland region. The dramatic landscape of the Bernese Alps has long attracted tourists by its beauty, although its inaccessibility meant that it could be viewed only from a distance, except for more hardy visitors who penetrated the uplands on foot or by mule. With the coming of the railways to the area in the late 19th century, it was only a matter of time before this new form of conveyance was extended into the mountains to allow more general access. Several private companies were formed to operate specific routes, although today these are all united under a single management, the Jungfraubahn. The first railway to commence operations was the Berner Oberlandbahn, whose services from Interlaken Ost to Lauterbrunnen and Grindelwald began in 1890. Their busy trains convey thousands of local passengers as well as tourists along the scenic route through the Lütschiner river valleys. The BOB also became responsible for running the scenic Schienegerplatte rack line, which since June 1893 has taken visitors during summer months from Wilderswil to this splendid viewpoint. Since 1891, the Bergbahn Lauterbrunnen-Meran funicular and mountain railway have connected the two villages, and from Meran it's possible to take a cable car to the Schildhorn for a truly spectacular panorama over the Alpine peaks. Visitors to Grindelwald and Lauterbrunnen were soon able to continue their excursions higher into the Bernese Oberland with the opening of the Wengen in 1893, linking the two resorts to Kleine Scheidegg. Finally, in 1912, an almost impossible dream was realized when the Jungfraubahn opened its line to Jungfraujoch. The village of Grindelwald, where we'll begin our journey with the Wengen, has the nickname of Glacier Village, owing to its proximity to two major ice sheets. These still dominate the region, although they no longer stretch right to the edge of the settlement. There's been habitation here since at least the 12th century, when much of the surrounding land was owned by the monastery at Interlaken. Tourism became an important industry during the 19th century, with winter sports becoming just as popular as summer activities. Although the church dates from the 18th century, the majority of the buildings in Grindelwald are relatively modern, as in 1892 a fire destroyed much of the village. To enjoy a mountain view of Grindelwald and its glaciers, we can take the cable car to Fürst, over 1,000 meters above the valley floor. Construction began in 1939, but was delayed during the Second World War, and it didn't finally open until 1946. The original facility was an unusual two-seater sidewards-facing chairlift. However, the enormous popularity of this route led to the introduction of six-seater cabins in the early 1990s, making this the world's first fully automatic gondola railway. It's possible to leave the lift at two intermediate stations, one of which turns the gondolas through 120 degrees. Alternatively, passengers can remain for the full 5,000-meter ride. From the top, there are magnificent views over the region, and the energetic can hike along one of the many paths over the mountain ridge, perhaps passing through the Marmot Valley to the Große Scheidegg. We start our ride to Kleine Scheidegg from Grindelwald station, which is shared by the Berner Oberlandbahn and the Wengen trains. This is a dual-gauge complex with the BOB's meter-gauge tracks lying alongside the 800mm line of the WAB. Both lines have identical electrical systems, as 1500 DC was adopted by both companies at the beginning of the 19th century. For the first kilometre of our journey, our way lies downhill, as we must lose 90 metres in height before reaching Groen station on the valley floor. Building began in the summer of 1891, with construction gangs starting from the base stations at Grindelwald and Lauterbrunnen and working towards the summit. About 800, mainly Italian, labourers were employed, and work progressed rapidly, the whole route being opened less than 2 years later, on the 20th of June, 1893. The railway was an immediate success, with almost 38,000 passengers being conveyed during the first year. And this popularity has continued, with over 3 million visitors using the line today. Because of heavy passenger demand in both summer and winter, trains are normally dispatched in groups of 2, 3, or even 4 sets at a time. Groen is the site of one of the 2 depots of the WAB, the other being at Lauterbrunnen. Here, rail cars and other stock are housed and repairs and renovations carried out. At the station, an older member of the WAB's electric fleet is on special duties, a reminder of earlier days in the company's history. For the first 16 years, the railway used steam traction, purchasing 8 H23 locos from SLM for the opening of the line, and adding a further 6 machines to the stable before the end of the century. The acquisition of 2 final machines brought the complement to 16. The first WAB loco is still in action after more than a century, now with the Brienz-Rothorn Railway as their loco number 5. The remainder of the steam machines were all taken out of service before 1920 and were subsequently scrapped. Electrification took place in 1909-1910, with the line from Lauterbrunnen to Kleine Scheidegg coming into operation a year ahead of its counterpart from Grindelwald. For this event, 13 locos were purchased from SLM with electrical equipment from Alliot, with the final 2 machines brought into service at the end of the 1920s. Most of these are still used on the Jungfraubahn tracks, either as goods or shunting engines for the WAB, or in regular service propelling trains along the spectacular Schienigerplatte line. In the late 1940s, rail cars were introduced on the Wengen, and these are now the principal form of motive power. The most modern members of the fleet are the 4 rail cars purchased in 1988, which are coupled to run as multiple units when passenger traffic is busy. At Groen, all trains must make a reversal, and station staff are kept busy ensuring passengers catch the right service and the route is correctly set. Our way to Kleine Scheidegg will be continuously uphill, for our train must gain over 1,100 meters in height during the next 7.5 kilometers of line. The The journey from Grindelwald to Kleine Scheidegg takes in the region of 35 minutes, less than half the time of a century ago when trains were propelled by steam. The WAB uses single-track operation, although to cope with the heavy volume of traffic there are several passing places along the line, as well as the possibility of crossing in stations. Points in passing places and unmanned stations are manually operated, with the guard doubling as pointsman. About a third of the line length is equipped with an automatic interlocking system. Gradients along the line are steep, with a maximum of 1 in 4 found along this section of the line. Rack assistance is used along the entire 19 kilometres of track, making it the longest rack railway in Switzerland. The Reichenbach-Pauli system was adopted by the builders, the same as that used on the Schienegerplatte railway. Both steam and electric locos are always marshalled downhill of their stock as a safety measure, and this is also true of rail cars. The Eiger has long fascinated mountaineers and was one of the many alpine peaks conquered in the mid-19th century. The first ascent was made via the Northwest Ridge by an Englishman, Charles Barrington, in 1858. The south and western spurs of the mountain were vanquished in the 1870s, and the eastern Mittellecke Ridge in 1885. But the infamous north face, which consists of some 2,300 meters of vertical rock, remained unconquered until 1938. This was the last of the 3 local peaks to be climbed, as the Mönch was scaled in 1857 and the Jungfrau, which is the highest mountain in the region, as early as 1811. Certain climbing sections are known by such sublime names as Traverse of the Gods and Swallow's Nest. However, the chilling title Death Bivouac attests to the extreme difficulty of this peak, which is compounded by the mountain's own microclimate. Even on a good day, clouds can rapidly form across the face, making for treacherous climbing conditions. We, however, are enjoying excellent weather as we sit back and enjoy our effortless climb along the mountainside. For the majority of its existence, the line between Grindelwald and Kleine Scheidegg only operated for part of the year. This route was closed every winter until the early 1930s, and all year-round running has taken place only since 1960. This has been made possible by the construction of 3 galleries to protect the line from the danger of snow and rock falls from the north face of the Eiger. During winter months, these are partially boarded up along the open side, but in summer, this additional protection is removed to allow passengers to enjoy the wonderful views over the region. In summer, the pastures beside the line become home to herds of cows. The tradition of bringing the beasts up here to graze goes back until at least the 12th century. The hillsides are also home to marmots, which can often be spotted playing in the sunshine near the tracks. In winter, when snow covers the hills and skiers frequent the slopes, they're asleep underground, enjoying their long hibernation. Although the Wengen tracks link the two resorts of Grindelwald and Lauterbrunnen, trains almost always terminate at Kleine Scheidegg, and through services are exceptional. We leave a bustling Kleine Scheidegg station and return to the tranquil Lauterbrunnen valley floor with its majestic glacial landscape. The impressive Staubach waterfall descends almost 290 meters down the sheer rock wall to provide a superb backdrop to the settlement. The village, which was first mentioned in 1240, is the largest in the valley. Once mining was an important industry here, but since the 19th century it's better known as a popular holiday resort. Another commercial activity found in Lauterbrunnen was lace making, practiced here since the 17th century. This was an important home industry in the valley for over 200 years, with many households dependent on the income generated from these skills. This beautiful craft is thriving. Many of the patterns still in use have been handed down through the generations, with acorns, oak leaves and flower motifs being extremely popular. There's a lace-making centre in the High Street run by Frau Elisabeth Steiner von Allmen, who learned lace-making from her mother. Here she passes on her skills to other lace-makers from Switzerland and abroad. Her pupils include several school children who will ensure this tradition is kept alive into the 21st century. We leave Lauterbrunnen to begin our journey with the Wengen up the steep valley side towards Wengen and Kleine Scheidegg. Lauterbrunnen is a busy junction and, like all the interchange stations on the Jungfraubahn network, is dual gauge. A transshipment siding allows for quick and easy transfer of goods between the BOB and WAB lines. The complex underwent major refurbishment in the early 1990s. A steel and glass roof was erected over the platforms to protect passengers from the elements, and an underpass was excavated to link the station with the BLM funicular to Mürren. One of the Wengen depots is situated here, and the sidings contain a number of older electric locos which work alongside the modern blue shunting stock. At almost 10.5 kilometers, the route from Lauterbrunnen to Kleine Scheidegg is 2 kilometers longer than that from Grindelwald. Gradients are gentler, with a maximum of 1 in 5.25 compared to the 1 in 4 found on the other line. Just after crossing the Weisse-Lucina River, the track divides, and we'll take the left-hand line, which curves in a northerly direction back along the valley. This new route was constructed between 1908 and 1910, as the steep gradients of the original track to Wengen caused problems for the smooth operation of the WAB. While this is a less direct route up the mountainside, it is gentler, and the line is protected from avalanche danger by a series of small tunnels. The new route is now taken by the majority of services, with the original way used only for special runs and some goods and works trains during summer months. At the end of our diversion north along the valley, we enter the 248-metre-long Tunnel, which loops the track back along itself in a horseshoe to run towards Wengen. There's no road access to Wengen, so visitors must leave their vehicles in the large car park beside Lauterbrunnen station before taking the train. All the necessities of life must be transported up the valley side by the railway, apart from some building materials and other bulky items which are moved by helicopter. On the approach to Wengen station, our line merges with the original track from Lauterbrunnen. To take the railway into the 21st century, the complex here is undergoing a modernization program, although the original station building remains to remind travellers of the line's 19th century roots. The first train arrived here in the summer of 1893, a relatively modern event in the history of the village. By the 13th century, a farming community had settled on this plateau some 500 metres above the valley floor. The name is believed to have been derived from Wengen, or steep slope. Its present popularity as a holiday resort began in the middle of the 19th century, with the English leading the way in making the village into a popular winter sports destination. The coming of the railway only served to increase the flow of visitors, especially once winter services were inaugurated in 1910. In 1859, one simple guest house catered for all visitors to the settlement. Today, 27 hotels and numerous holiday apartments give guests a wide choice of accommodation. The streets are almost vehicle-free, although most hotels have electric carts which ferry passengers and their luggage to and from the station. We leave Wengen to continue our climb towards Kleine Scheidegg, enjoying the warm summer weather and splendid views of the region. the first 3 decades, services on this route operated during summer months only. Winter running commencing in 1910 with the opening of the new track to Wengen. An all-year-round timetable between Lauterbrunnen and Kleine Scheidegg was introduced in 1925, 30 years before it became possible on the Grindelwald side. We're riding in one of the WAB's fleet of BDHE 44 rail cars, normally used as 3-car sets on this side of the system and as 2-car sets on the steeper Grindelwald route. 18 of these were purchased in the late 1940s from SLM, with electrical equipment by BBC, and these were augmented by 6 additional cars purchased in 1970. Our train enters the Almend Gallery, built in 1990. In summer, the space alongside the track is used to store some of the snow cannons, which keep the local pistes in prime condition during the ski season. At the exit, the down train must wait for us to cross, as this is one of the regular passing places along the line. In summer, the area provides ample grazing for herds of cows, but when the snow covers the ground, the land alongside the line is transformed into a scenic ski run down the mountain from Kleine Scheidegg to Wengen. We've now left the Lauterbrunnen valley behind, and the train passes across the Wengen Alp, which gives its name to the line. The hotel above Wengen Alp station is popular with walkers and climbers. Possibly its most famous guest was Charles Barrington, who strolled out of the lobby very early one morning to make the first ascent of the Eiger and returned in time for dinner. Our train now makes a final push towards the summit, passing over the steepest section of this route with the gradient increased to 1 in 5. From the right-hand windows of our coaches, we have wonderful panoramas of all three giants of the region. The two WAB lines meet at Kleine Scheidegg station, and our train will terminate here. However, a special triangular junction excavated into the hillside allows sets from either end to reverse if required, and continue along the other line with the railcar remaining in the mandatory downhill position. Kleine Scheidegg station is equally busy in winter, with skiers arriving here to take advantage of the wide selection of well-prepared pistes. When snow conditions are right, it's possible to ski from here right down to Grindelwald station, and then rest aching legs in the train on the return journey. The station is a social centre as well as a transport facility, and hot food and drink are readily available at one of the many restaurants located here. To the north of Kleine Scheidegg lies the Mannlichen Ridge, which divides the Lauterbrunnen and Lucina valleys. This is also a popular winter sports area, with a variety of pistes radiating from the summit plateau. When legs tire, it's good to sit and admire the magnificent views. Stretch out and top up your suntan, or visit the welcoming restaurant for a reviving hot chocolate. In summer, the hilltop is equally frequented by walkers, for since the mid-1950s, visitors from Wengen have been able to make an easy ascent by cable car. Access has also been possible from Grindelwald since December 1978. At 6.24 kilometers, this gondola cableway is the longest in Europe, and the journey takes about half an hour from bottom to top. From the viewing platform at the escarpment edge, there are magnificent panoramas over the region, and a bird's-eye view of Lauterbrunnen and Wengen villages. In the summer, you can take a scenic walk back to Kleine Scheidegg. Kleine Scheidegg station, like those at Grindelwald and Lauterbrunnen, is dual gauge, although in this case the meter gauge tracks belong to the Jungfraubahn rather than the BOB. Both the WAB and JB railways use rack assistance, with the WAB adopting the Rickenbach-Pauli system, which is now being partially replaced by von Roll plate rack. A new one-piece cog rail was developed especially for the Jungfraubahn by Herr Strub, the inspector of railways for the SBB, which was later adopted by other Swiss lines. In order to keep the trains running even in the coldest weather, special electric point heaters are incorporated into the trackwork to prevent snow clogging. The ambitious plan to build a line to the Jungfrau was the brainchild of the Swiss financier and railway entrepreneur Adolf Guyazeller, who made a rough sketch of his vision while on holiday in the region with his family. Work began in 1896, and 2 years later, Herr Guyazeller was present when the first section of track opened, though sadly he died before the line was finished. The railway was brought into service in stages, thereby generating much-needed revenue to continue financing the excavation. From September 1898, trains operated to Eiger Gletscher, with the line reaching the tunnel station at Eiger Wand in 1903. The excavation to Eismeer took only a further 2 years, But from there work was slow, with the whole railway finally opening on the 1st of August 1912. Electric traction was adopted from the opening of the line, steam power being deemed too hazardous in the long tunnel. A three-phase system was adopted with power at 650 volts AC, 40 Hz, requiring twin contact wires. In the 1960s, the system was uprated to 1125 volts, 50 Hz, to cope with increased loadings. In 1898, two SLM HE22 locos were purchased, shortly to be joined by another 5 machines. These used the Rowan system, whereby optimum locomotive cog pressure is achieved when the rear of the back carriage rests on the loco rather than its own rear bogie. These form one articulated unit, while the second coach is loose-coupled in the normal fashion. In 1912, 3 HGE22 locos were purchased, as the line above Icemere was worked without rack until 1951. The final 2 machines were brought into service during the 1920s, bringing the total complement to 12. This stock conveyed all passengers until the mid-1950s, when the first rail cars were introduced on the line. Today, rail cars operate the main services, although several of the old locos and coaches are used to transport private parties. In the mid-1990s, 4 BDHE48 double rail cars were introduced to the line, and we are making our journey to the top of Europe in one of these comfortable modern trains. We are now just over 2,060 metres above sea level, but must gain almost 1,400 metres in height before completing our journey, and gradients of 1 in 4 are utilised to achieve this. The Jungfraubahn has always had its own hydroelectric supply for the line, initially from a powerhouse at Lauterbrunnen, and more recently from the facility by the BOB tracks below Burglaunen. Surplus energy was supplied to the WAB and Berner Oberlandbahn, enabling them to electrify at an early date. However, generated current is augmented by recuperative braking, which means that energy from descending railcars can be fed back into the wires. 3 down trains can return sufficient power to the system to supply 1 train on its upward journey. Ahead of our train stands the imposing Eiger, through which we'll shortly be passing on our way to the summit. An exciting walking path, the Eiger Trail, runs from Eiger Gletscher Station along the base of the north face of the mountain to finish at Alpiglen Station. We pass through a short gallery and tunnel with a combined length of just over 300 metres, a mere hint of the excavation to come. About 80% of this 9.33 kilometre line lies in tunnel, the greatest proportion of underground working of any surface railway in Europe. The workshop at Eiger Gletscher Station is one of the highest in the world. JB stock has no access to the valley, so all repairs and renovations must be carried out at the workshop here and in the depot at Kleine Scheidegg. As its name indicates, Eiger Gletscher is situated on the edge of the impressive Eiger Glacier, and the snout is easily accessible from the railway during summer months. The station here was the terminus of the line for the first 5 years of operation, although the ice sheet was much closer to the track a century ago. This was the site of the camp where the workers lived during the boring of the tunnel. At 7,122 metres, it's under half the length of the Simplon, Gotthard or Lurchburg tunnels. However, it was only possible to bore from one direction, so progress was slow. Although work could continue inside the mountain throughout the year, access to the site was practically impossible once the snows came. During the summer, some 300 workers were employed, the number reducing to about 80 in winter. Just outside Eiger Gletscher Station, we enter the tunnel portal and will remain underground for the remainder of our journey. However, it will be possible to see the outside world during the course of the ride. The tunnel lies only a few meters behind the mountain face for much of its route, and the former adits, where rock spoil was dumped down the mountain during the excavation, have been transformed into viewing galleries. All ascending trains pause at the two special stations constructed inside the tunnel to allow down trains to pass and give passengers time to look through these observation windows. The line was opened to the first station at Eigerwand, or Eiger Wall, in the summer of 1903, and this was the end of the line for 2 years. The openings here are located in the north face of the Eiger, and access is possible from these galleries out onto the mountain should rescue services need to reach climbers in trouble. Passengers are kept safely behind the huge glass windows, and there are a number of openings on offer in order to experience the wonderful panoramas over the Kleine Scheidegg ridge and down towards Grindelwald. After Eigerwand, the track climbs steadily, making a horseshoe curve to run in a southwesterly direction back towards the Jungfrau. We're now over 3,000 meters above sea level and running just behind the southeastern wall of the Eiger. The solid nature of the gneiss and limestone rock through which we're passing was difficult to excavate, but obviated the necessity for a tunnel lining. Eismeer station, which opened in July 1907, had its own post office and restaurant. It remained the terminus of the line for the next 7 years. The viewing galleries at both stations were originally open to the elements, with only an iron balcony between the sightseers and the ice and snow. The name Eismeer means sea of ice, and the windows here look out over the glacier whose waters feed the Schwarze Lucina River. This eventually flows into the River Rhine and on to the North Sea. The openings have now been glassed in as a safety precaution, necessitated by the enormous increase in passenger numbers. Until the 1950s, travellers had to change trains at Eismeer station, as the rack section ended here and the remainder of the line to the summit was worked by a Dijon. Today, this is not necessary, and we remain in the same train for the final section of the journey. Because of the heavy loadings, trains run in convoy, and we're following one of the older sets. Crossing can take place only in the tunnel stations, and the returning passengers remain in their seats for the entire descent. The summit of the line is at Jungfraujoch station, at 3,454 meters above sea level, the highest in the whole of Europe. The first train arrived here on the 1st of August 1912, and one of the vintage locos has made the journey earlier in the day and is now stabled in the sidings. The approach to Jungfraujoch is steep, and the lights on the catenary wires herald the arrival of the older railcar preceding our train. A twin-track hall handled all the traffic until 1991, when the complex was extended and a new line built in a separate area parallel to the original terminus. The first train enters this new facility, which is often used for reserved services. Meanwhile, our train draws into one of the original tracks. A modern complex was built here in the 1980s to replace the original wooden Berghaus, which burned down in 1972. Inside the airy building, visitors can stroll around the exhibition area and enjoy a meal at one of the restaurants. The lack of oxygen at this altitude is noticeable to visitors, who are advised to enjoy their visit at a leisurely pace. You can buy a souvenir to remind you of your visit before sending a postcard home from Europe's highest post office, complete with a special postmark. A visit to the Ice Palace is a unique experience. Caverns have been hewn out of the glacier, allowing visitors to enter the inside of this glassy environment. The floor is highly slippery, so caution is advised. Fantastic carvings are made from the solid ice, with Arctic scenes predominating. The beautiful birds and animals resemble glass sculptures by Lalique. These wonderful grottos and sculptures were begun in 1934 and have been steadily extended over the decades. Outside, the snow and ice are the location for more winter fun, even in the height of summer. To ascend even higher, you can take a helicopter ride around the mountain tops and view the Bernese Oberland from the air. If you prefer to keep your feet on the ground, you can try your skill on skis. However, staying upright is not as easy as it looks. For the energetic, it's possible to walk at will along the trail to the Mönch hut. However, to tackle the Arlish Glacier, it's necessary to hire an experienced guide or join an organized hike. At 23 kilometers from end to end, this is Europe's longest ice sheet. It's believed to be about 800 meters thick at the Concordia Platz, where the main flow is joined by a number of other ice rivers before continuing down towards the Rhone Valley. A novel way to travel is by sled, hauled by one of the teams of huskies which live in the kennels at the Eiger Gletscher. The first dogs were part of the tunnel-building team, bringing mail and other supplies from Wengen in the winter. The huskies and their kennelman are on the staff of the Jungfrau railway and travel here on the early morning train. The husky pack is made up of around 40 dogs, with teams of 10 to 12 working together around the 500-meter-long track. For breathtaking views over Switzerland, it's necessary to take the high-speed lift to the Sphinx viewing terrace. This modern complex, opened in the summer of 1996, enables visitors to enjoy the magnificent views all year round. It incorporates the old observatory and weather station, which are not open to the public. The location is particularly favorable for astronomy, as the air is very pure and there's no light pollution at night. This superb vantage point affords a 360-degree panorama of the region, and on a clear day, it's possible to see from France to Germany. Closer at hand, there's a superb view of the Jungfrau, the name of which means young woman. She's protected by the Mönch, or monk, from the Eiger, or ogre. With the majestic Bernese Oberland laid out at our feet, the journey with the Jungfraubahn to the top of Europe is undoubtedly the experience of a lifetime.